How did you get involved and interested in this whole idea of beaches washing away and whether we should nourish them or not?
I was always interested in the outdoors and doing something with the environment, and went to grad school at Duke in the early 90s and fell into this topic in a group project in a class.
So you're the driving force, you and your team, on this database that essentially talks about how much money we collectively have spent all around the country on beach nourishment.
The database is the most comprehensive database of beach nourishment episodes, probably in the world, definitely in the US. Since the early 90s, mid to early 90s, when we identified that there was a proliferation of communities that were looking to put sand on their beach, whether it was federally funded or locally funded or state funded. And so we decided that let's keep track of these. This could be something important moving forward. So we have about 2,600 episodes of nourishment at a cost of about $16 billion inflated in 2022 numbers.
Is this literally pouring tax dollars on the beach only to see them wash away into the ocean?
Well, I don't know if you can see the sand flying away in the wind, but it's very similar to that in our view. We know that there's a lot of reasons why that are given for nourished beaches, and we question basically every one of them. Now, the science behind nourishment, what we see here is one thing. We're more concerned with the questions about public policy as it applies to beach nourishment in terms of who pays, who benefits, how much, what else can we do? Is there something unique that we haven't thought of that we can implement?
And you mentioned that you've been talking about this for decades, 30 years ago, and no one's listening.
Nope. No one is listening.
From a public policy point of view, is this a good use of tax dollars?
I would say no. I would say there is inequitable distribution of benefits and costs. This project here is funded 100% by the federal government, which AKA means the taxpayer.
You're in my tax dollars.
You're mine. Everybody who pays taxes pays for this project. And it benefits the first row property owners. There's no doubt that first row property owners do get a benefit from a wider beach, but that you have to think that benefit over time, as the beach gets narrower, that benefit reduces. If the beach erodes after a nourishment and there's no storm, then what? Nobody ever talks about that. What about that money that was spent to widen that beach, but no storm came, so it didn't provide any protection?
It literally washed away.
And over time, it always washes away, right? So how do we consider that? Is that a benefit? Is that a cost? How do we analyze that? Should we be doing that? These are the questions that we want to ask that aren't being asked right now. It's counterintuitive to think that the most opportune time and that the time that this project gets its best bang for the buck is if a hurricane would make landfall here as soon as the project was over.
So what's the solution in your view?
The solution is to open up all the alternatives in coastal environmental management, sit down and talk about them, and make some really, really difficult decisions in the long term. We have to consider sea level rise, we have to consider global warming, we have to consider larger, more intense storms.
Are there solutions to doing this rather than just dump sand on the beach?
Absolutely. Strategic retreat is 100% viable solution in a majority of places that have a coastal erosion problem or a shoreline migration problem. Strategic retreat will remove properties that are vulnerable to coastal processes before they get damaged.
That's controversial too. You're asking me to give up my home if it's suddenly threatened, aren't you?
It's unfortunate, but the reality is if you own oceanfront property in certain places, that property is not going to be here at some point in the future unless something is done to protect it. And then the questions are, what do you do? Who pays? Now, I'm not saying don't nourish any beach. There are definitely beaches that are extremely developed that really have no other alternative. It's densely developed where nourishment makes sense. It makes even better sense if those communities pay for it themselves, but they don't.
Do people understand the massive amount of federal dollars that go into this?
Nobody understands it. I don't think politicians understand it. I think the Corps understands it. The common beachgoer does not understand it at all. Most of the coastal property owners do not understand it either. From the public policy perspective, we don't see any evidence that nourishing beaches provides public benefits. There really is no end in sight to these 50-year projects that the Army Corps of Engineers authorizes.